Welcome to the Struggle for Black Equality, a series of conversations that attempt to answer the question, why has it been such a struggle for Black Americans to gain basic civil rights, the right to eat in a restaurant, live in a neighborhood, go to a school, work a job, and be treated equally under the law? This conversation, School Desegregation, looks at the movement to desegregate schools in the 1950s and includes discussions of early court cases, Brown versus Board of Education, the initial reaction to Brown, the court's go-slow approach to integration, the Southern Manifesto of Southern Democrats in opposition to Brown, legal and illegal resistance to integration, Little Rock defiance, Eisenhower's response, the Civil Rights Acts of 1957 and 1960, and the retrenchment of opposition forces. The first crack in legalized school segregation occurred in the Supreme Court ruling of 1938, Missouri ex rel. Gaines versus Canada. The court ruled that granting a Black graduate student, Lloyd Gaines, a scholarship to attend school out of state while denying him access to the University of Missouri denied him equal protection of the law. The court said states that provide a school for white students must provide the same school for Black students by integrating or creating a second school for Blacks. Thurgood Marshall, the head of the NAACP's Legal Defense and Education Fund, led the assault on segregation in schools that resulted in 3 unanimous court decisions in 1950 that struck down Jim Crow on railway dining cars and required states to provide equal schools or integrate existing schools. The Brown case was a petition by Oliver Brown on behalf of his daughter, Linda, who was forced to travel a mile by bus to attend a Black school, even though there was a school 3 blocks from her house. In 1954, the court ruled that public education is a right which must be made available to all on equal terms. The court asked this question: does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities and other tangible factors may be equal, deprive the children of the minority group of equal educational opportunities? The court said, we believe it does, arguing that separate schools generate a feeling of inferiority, are inherently unequal, and deprive students the equal protection of the laws. Black Americans rejoiced at the Brown decision, seeing it as the beginning of a multiracial society. Thurgood Marshall, who argued the case, became an icon. Most whites believed that integration was now inevitable. Several hundred school districts in the border states integrated quickly and without incident. But on May 31, 1955, the momentum stopped when the court adopted a go-slow approach to integration by assigning responsibility for drawing up integration plans to local authorities and enforcement to local federal judges, while only requiring a prompt and reasonable start toward full compliance, and that authorities must proceed with all deliberate speed. Because it set no specific timeline, the court had established a constitutional right, but deferred its implementation. This map demonstrates how slow the desegregation process actually was. By 1964, the states in the darkest color had integrated less than 1% of African Americans into white schools. In 1956, 101 Southern members of Congress signed a Declaration of Constitutional Principles, otherwise known as the Southern Manifesto, that proclaimed that the court had no power to force school integration, that only states and parents had power over education, and that states had the right to legally oppose enforcement of the court's order. The manifesto ushered in an era of massive resistance to school desegregation. The foundation of Southern legal resistance to integration was the stalling tactic of refusing to develop integration plans. This forced Black parents to file desegregation suits in more than 2,000 Southern school districts. Black students attempting to enter a white school faced the gauntlet of hate, intimidation, rock-throwing mobs, and pickets and racial slurs. White teachers were threatened to ignore or persecute Black students. Southern states enacted more than 450 laws and resolutions limiting integration, including acts closing integrated schools, revoking the license of teachers of mixed classes, amending compulsory attendance laws so no child would be forced to attend an integrated school, and providing state payments for private tuition so that districts could abolish their public school rather than integrate. The most successful measure was the pupil placement laws that guaranteed each child freedom of choice in selecting a school. While a child could not be denied access to a school because of race, they could be denied because of the psychological effects on the students of attendance at a particular school or the morals, conduct, health, and personal standards of the pupil. In 1958, the court upheld the constitutionality of pupil placement laws. States also harassed the NAACP, requiring it to make its membership public, making membership cause for dismissal from teaching and state jobs, charging the organization with barity, persistent instigation of lawsuits, and making it a crime to oppose a school segregation ordinance. As a result, many NAACP branches closed and membership dropped. Much of the resistance was illegal. Hostile segregationists argued for violent resistance. The KKK revived. Thousands of whites enrolled in the White Citizens Councils, the National Association for the Advancement of White People, and the American States Rights Association. These groups were determined to defy Brown, enforce traditional racist orthodoxy, and use methods of intimidation and insurrection if necessary. Little Rock, Arkansas became the first national battleground of school desegregation. In 1957, the school board of Little Rock agreed to a federal court order to integrate Central High School. But when 9 black students attempted to enter the school, they were stopped by a contingent of National Guard troops sent by Orville Faubus for what he said was to prevent violence, but really to deny access. The governor, who faced a tough re-election campaign, had decided to become the defender of white supremacy. The next day, an angry white mob and the Guard again denied entrance to the students. National and state authorities were now in direct conflict. President Eisenhower, who believed you don't change hearts and minds with laws, had no interest in getting involved in issues of civil rights. He believed Brown was a mistake and supported states' rights. But the former general had no choice but to act, since he was tasked with executing federal law. Eisenhower and Faubus met and agreed to a truce. Faubus withdrew the National Guard. But on the day of admission, a mob surrounded the school. The mayor ordered the students removed for their own safety. Eisenhower then moved, federalizing the Arkansas National Guard and sending 1,000 paratroopers from the 101st Airborne Division to protect the students. The students were admitted and protected by individual armed guards for the rest of the year. 2 cautious civil rights measures were helpful but weak regarding integration. The Civil Rights Act of 1957 authorized the Justice Department to seek injunctions against interference with the right to vote and established a commission on civil rights with power to investigate, appraise, and report, but ignored the issue of segregation. The Civil Rights Act of 1960 authorized courts to appoint federal referees to protect voting rights and made obstructing court orders a federal offense. In the face of significant progress, though, retrenchment still held sway. Most Northerners lost interest in school integration after the crisis dissipated. Little Rock closed down all public high schools, delaying integration by another 2 years. In 1964, only 123 black children of more than 7,000 attended an integrated school. Governor Orville Faubus continued to win elections for years to come and became a folk hero. Some takeaways. Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP pursued a vigorous litigation strategy against school segregation that resulted in the court ruling stating that separate schools are inherently unequal and deny blacks equal protection of the law. Southerners pursued an aggressive legal and illegal resistance campaign to integration, claiming the court had no right to roll over education, which was a matter for states and parents. The governor of Arkansas defied the court ruling, resulting in President Eisenhower responding by sending federal troops to enroll Black students in Central High School. Little Rock responded to forced integration by closing its public schools. Some things to think about. Do you agree with the court's ruling that separate schools create a feeling of inferiority and are inherently unequal? Why or why not? Do you agree with the argument of the Southern Manifesto that education is a matter for states and parents and not the national government? Why or why not? Do you agree with Eisenhower's use of federal troops to admit Black students to school? Why or why not? And what does the decision to close Little Rock high schools tell us about the white perspective on integration in the 1950s? Some resources. The Brown versus Board of Education decision can be viewed at OIES, which carries all of the Supreme Court decisions, Southern Manifesto of 1956, She Walked Alone, an interview with Elizabeth Eckford, one of the Little Rock Nine, in Daisy Bates' The Long Shadow of Little Rock, and Harvard Sitkoff's The Struggle for Black Equality, which provides the foundation for our conversations. Thanks for joining our conversation today. God bless you, and keep thinking about things that matter.